Welcome back everybody to a Time Travelers podcast. Today we're referring back to an episode I did on the very first video game, Tennis for Two. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. It's had a decent reaction. So, when people talk about the history of gaming, they usually start with consoles, characters, or favourite titles. And what they often miss is games don't just evolve in isolation. Every decade of gaming is shaped by forces outside the industry, be it war, economics, technology, culture, and business models. And today we're going to dive into what games existed in each era, what went wrong, what went right, and we've got a special guest, an aficionado in gaming, in all things gaming. As always, I'm not doing it alone. I've got my co-host Zig along for the ride again. Welcome in, Zig.
Yo. What's going on, everybody?
Hi, man. How are you getting on?
Man, obviously we're recording this after Christmas, so I'm in the holiday spirit, man. I can't complain.
Beautiful. So I just want to give a little introduction to our guest, Squeegs. I would say he's a good friend, but he's also a family member. He's my brother. He knows everything that you could think of when it comes to gaming. If ever I'm stuck when it comes to gaming, or I need an honest opinion, a validating opinion, a recommendation, this is the guy I go to. I know you've gamed with him, Zig. You know, we met through gaming. That's the beautiful thing about this.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a major event that happens during the history of gaming to do with Nintendo, the North American crash of gaming, and basically what we've got to be thankful for when it comes to Nintendo, and is the guy to ask about it. So welcome in, Squeegs.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for such a lovely introduction. I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of the channel, so I'm excited to speak to you about this crash and basically how it happened and how it was revived. So I appreciate you having me on.
I want to kick it off really with a little icebreaker. I just want to know, what's everyone's earliest gaming memory? And I'll throw that out to the viewers as well. If you want to let us know in the comments section, let us know what your earliest gaming memory is. What stands out as what made you fall in love with video gaming?
Man, this is going back quite a ways. Probably late 90s, early 2000s. I had picked up, actually I was at a family friend's house, and my first video game, like on an actual console, was going to be like Sonic the Hedgehog. And that kind of influenced me into get the newest consoles and getting the better games and doing that. But yeah, I think Sonic the Hedgehog is kind of what really introduced me to the whole gaming lifestyle. I know a few times before that I would go to like the arcade or something, but you know, arcade games in me, you got to be kind of physical for that stuff, and I'm more of a sit in the couch and chill type of guy. So that's my earliest experience. What about you, Keith?
My earliest experience is not so much playing a game. I think it was watching my dad play Final Fantasy VIII on the PlayStation 1 back in the 90s. But playing games-wise would be playing Mario Party 64 with Robbie and my mum and my dad, and then No Mercy on the Nintendo 64, WWE No Mercy as well. And then that just progressed from there. We Game Boys, and then onto the PlayStation 2, which is when I started obviously grasping. I was at the age where I could grasp games better and I could pick them up better. So it'd be about 1996, 1997 was my earliest memory of it.
Nah, it's class, man. Like some of my core memories with you are like through video games. Throwing it back memory-wise, then starting from the beginning. Video games, they're shaped by history and what's going on at history at the time. So when you think of those early birth of video games, and I'll just like refer to it again, like my episode on Tennis for Two, there was all research projects during the early stages of the Cold War, that technology boom, like invention of the oscilloscope, the way physics evolved, government funding computers, all that carry on, military research, and then obviously needing more funding. So these people needed more funding, so they'd have these open days for investors. And a couple of scientists basically figured out that there ain't really much to show them. There's no interactive. So these early video games were basically investment tools. So you end up having games like OXO, Tennis for Two. So when we talk about gaming in 1950s, like what we're really talking about is the birth of interaction, not an industry. You follow on from that, like moving into 1960s, and then you start getting games like Space War. Pong ends up coming along. It basically establishes a pattern that you see repeatedly through these next few decades. A bit of to me, to you kind of gaming.
And speaking of that, for you, Keegs, from a modern player's perspective, and not just any modern player, but I mean, I've played video games with you in the past, and you're an absolute animal at a lot of these games that you play. So, from your perspective, how wild does like this earlier hardware look? So, going back to Tennis for Two, I'm pretty sure you would have been an absolute animal in that game too. But what do you think?
Yeah, it's crazy to see how far gaming's come in a short time, really, in the grand scheme of since the first game was made to now. Obviously, the limitations back then, there was no gaming, so the fact that someone was able to make a game just for a science fair, on the episode, like Robbie said, it went under the radar as the first game, and it wasn't until a decade or so later that you had Pong that is considered to be the first game. But to compare it to today's games, it's night and day. There's no comparing really in quality sense, but the significance of it is undescribable, really.
Yeah, no, I mean it's come so far, man. And just to piggyback off my first question is, do you see any DNA or resemblances from these early games in games, not just games today, but like specifically games that you play today? I know a lot of the back and forth stuff, like Robbie touched on earlier, but do you see any comparisons that's, from the 50s to today?
Yeah, there is comparison. So maybe not so much with Tennis for Two, as I said, it was more of a prototype game, but the likes of Pong with you're playing against your friend, and now we have it as a worldwide thing. So it's the earliest form of multiplayer, really. And then on from that, even with your arcade games, you've still got elements of that. So you had Donkey Kong, and Pac-Man. You've still got elements of that with scoreboards and ranks and ranking systems. In a way, there's a lot of games out there which are not well known, but there'll be a lot of games out there that take a lot of elements from the early games, the 50s, the 60s, 70s.
To be fair, you touched on my follow-up question really there about like the old arcade mechanic of it, the back and forth, the competitive nature of it. Like you say, it's become such a phenomenon, hasn't it, in regards of maybe not so much the mechanic of it, but the premise of it. They're all playing against each other. Now you look at online gaming, like you say, it rules the world and stuff. And then looking into and just following up on that really, when we get to 1970s, and you mentioned like arcade games there, and then obviously you've got your games like your Pac-Man, your Space Invaders, Donkey Kong. Really, this is where, and this is a common theme really, whenever we do anything about history, whether it be boxing in our previous one, money enters the picture. And this is really where gaming explodes the first time around. And it really it stops becoming academic and starts becoming commercial. So you have the accessibility to televisions in households, starts bringing out consoles. Those early consoles are expensive. TVs might be expensive. You've got a lot of people, especially really in North America, where arcade games really took off. Coin-operated entertainment, that really takes a boom now. So it becomes almost like a social event as well as a solo entertainment venture. The question stops being like, what can computers do, and starts becoming, what will people pay for over and over again? You start having stuff like design consequences, like short sessions, quick attention grabbers. Because obviously, if you lose on level 2, you're going to put another coin into this arcade machine and you're going to try and get to level 3. So there's a quick turnaround in income. you've also got immediate feedback. So if your game isn't generating any income, you know that game ain't up to much. Every design choice in early arcade games basically exists because of one thing, and that is the quarter.
To what you were saying with the whole arcade thing, especially here in North America. I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, it was like, I know my parents would tell me all the time. It was like they'd get off, right out of school, and everybody would just go straight to the arcades, man. And that's what it was. You'd go to the arcade with a pocket full of quarters. You know what I mean? So that's kind of crazy. But I do have a question here for you, Keegs. Like, speaking of arcades, when you think of like the golden age of arcades, so this, what's the first image or game that pops into your head? I think I already know what it's going to be, but I do want to pick your brain a little bit.
So the first game I think of when I think of arcade games is Pac-Man. I think that would be most people's choices in that. But then you also have Space Invaders, and you have Dragon's Lair, which is a different kind of game to Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. So you have all these classic games that, like Robbie touched on earlier, they do start easy and then get harder, and it's a design just to make you spend more money in these arcades because you want to do better, you want to learn from what you've done. There's also the culture of high scores, so high scores are massive for arcade games, getting your name on that leaderboard, and obviously showing your friends that, yeah, I'm number one, or I'm on the leaderboard. It is bragging rights, really.
Right, and that kind of does piggyback my next question. My next question I had for you is, do you feel like this era that we're talking about specifically set expectations that still exist in like the gaming culture today? Like you said, leaderboards to maybe pay to win, Warzone type stuff. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I think you do get games that are still compared to these arcade games. Obviously, Donkey Kong / Mario still going today, and Tetris is one of the biggest selling games of all time, and it's so simple. But you do get comparisons still from modern day games, how they are to the arcade games, and it's good to see really that, looking back, how simple some of these games are, but still leave a footprint on, obviously, gamers as well.
Yeah, and I know, and I mean, this kind of goes back to this next question for you, Keegs. Kind of goes back to, this whole culture of pay to win stuff, and now in comparison to back then, like if arcades had stayed dominant, right? So like, let's say like the 70s and 80s, and we don't have in-home consoles, let's say. If arcades would have stayed dominant, how different do you think the gaming scene would be today?
I do believe there wouldn't be the stigma around gaming that obviously the older generation have, or people that don't do it have, because you are going out. You're going to an arcade and meeting with your friends, and you're socialising, whereas you don't have to do that now. But if it was still dominated by arcade games, like I said, I don't think it'd be worth as much as an industry, but I think it would be a lot more social, and there wouldn't be as much negativity as there is around gaming, the misconception of gaming, really.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I do agree with you. And there is that misconception around the whole gaming. But no, I appreciate your insight on that, dude.
One of the reasons we got Keegs in really is this next section. So just following up on what had happened. So basically, the arcade boom didn't crash. Well, the reality is like it did, and the early 80s proved that games can grow fast, but they can collapse even faster. What is the great crash of 1983? Joe, what happened? Who saved it? How have we got to where we have today?
So the crash of 83 was a period between 1983 and it lasted until around 1985 in North America. And what had happened is the home video game market just collapsed. So there was an oversaturation of consoles, which I'll touch on, but the collapse happened, and the industry at the time, so the gaming industry at the time, was worth around 3.2 billion, but in 1983 it dropped to around 100 million, which is insane, really. So just to put in comparison, if it happened today, that's the equivalent of the gaming industry being worth 10.7 billion and it dropping down to 325 million. So they had a drop of 97% on revenue. And like I mentioned, this was due to an oversaturation of games and consoles, and there wasn't good quality games. There was no quality checking back then. So you had your likes of the Atari 2600, ColecoVision, the Atari 5200, and Intellivision. So these was all the game consoles. There was too many on the market, and there was all bringing out a lot of games with no quality checking. There was just low quality games like E.T. So the film E.T., considered one of the best films ever made. It was absolutely huge when it came out, but the game is also famous because it's considered the worst game ever made. It just had no good qualities to it. So with games like that leaking onto the market, it caused people to start distrusting the creators of these consoles. And it wasn't just the consoles, the companies that was affected. You had retailers that was also affected because there was buying massive stocks of these games, and when the crash happened, they had unsold stocks. A lot of the game companies shut down, they stopped making games. They had to, and the ones that carried on had to have massive layoffs in the company.
So basically, like, gaming in itself was it was dead. When and how did Nintendo come into the equation, and how does Nintendo come in and help save the day?
Nintendo were key in the resurgence in North America. So in Japan, like I said, everything was fine. They had the Famicom, which is a game console, and what Nintendo wanted to do was start rebuilding the trust of the consumer. They rebranded the Famicom to the NES, so the Nintendo Entertainment System. They steered away from calling it a home console and went with an entertainment system instead. So there was a few things that Nintendo did. They rebranded. They also quality checked every game. So every game had a quality check, and you might, if you played Nintendo games and they're still on the Switch games now, you'll have a Nintendo seal of approval. It'll be a little seal on the game printed on the cartridge. Just that's their way of showing that the game has been checked by them, the quality is good, and they're happy with it. So they've basically made that and sent it out. And what they also did was, which is impressive for the limitations back then, but they installed a lockout chip in the NES, which meant that the console wouldn't run any unlicensed games. So they had to be licensed by Nintendo to work on the NES. They also only let developers publish a few games a year, so they wasn't allowed to keep pumping out games. They could have 3 or 4 games a year that they obviously personally checked and made sure it was okay to be published. It's interesting because before the launch of NES in America, they brought it over to America to gaming conventions, and it wasn't really received all that well. So what they did was they brung out an accessory, and it's called ROB, or ROB, and basically it's a robotic operating buddy. And it was an accessory you got with the NES, and it was a robot, a little robot, and it worked with a couple of games. So it was actually more of an interactive toy, and that's what they marketed it as. So they kind of not lied. I'm trying to think of a better word. They kind of deceived retailers with this ROB. They could then say it's an interactive toy and it's not a console. So this interactive toy, what it would do is, it was built like a little robot, and in its camera in its eyes. There was little cameras, and the screen would flash. You wouldn't be able to see it, but the screen would flash, and then that's how it got its prompt. So it would move things on it in its little area. It would be able to pick up something, move, and then put it down. And it wasn't a great success. It only lasted, I believe it only lasted around a year or two, but it was instrumental in getting these retailers on board with stocking NES and the games.
Following up on that, what are like some of the like iconic titles that really put a foothold in North America and basically got it all up and running again? In regards of like any iconic titles, if there is any, like, do you think today's players appreciate the effects that these games had on their gaming experience today?
Yeah, so the games back then, you'll definitely know. So you had Super Mario Brothers, which is still going today, and you had Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda came out on the NES. That's still going today. And you also had Metroid, which is lesser known than the other two, but they are still bringing the Metroid series out. And these games, shaped a lot of what gaming is today. I don't believe these games are appreciated for what they did. Obviously, people playing them now, the new iterations of them, but I don't think they'll realise how important these games actually are to consoles.
Mate, it's fascinating, man. I didn't realise really like what Nintendo did, even in regards of it being a Wild West pre-Nintendo, where any Joe Blogs, Tom, Dick or Harry can just bring a game out and then flog it, market it, whether it be good or not. And then obviously with Nintendo putting in chips where it's basically, look, it's our way or the highway. That's the thing I think I've learned more in all this, like learnt the most, that you look at modern gaming and you have these gaming exclusive to Xbox, exclusive to PlayStation, and that's really the early form of that, innit? It's basically everything's exclusive to us unless we give you the green light. In regards of this Nintendo era, could be from, like you said, the rebranding, the Rob, the quality control. What's one thing, if you could pick one, what you'd want viewers to know or like gaming enthusiasts to know, this is what you need to be thankful for when it comes to Nintendo?
The most important thing that Nintendo did was quality, the quality assurance. Because without the quality assurance and without them putting the lock on unlicensed games, retailers won't have been on board, which means that North America probably wouldn't have bounced back. And if they did, it wouldn't be for another decade or two. So the gaming industry today wouldn't be as big as it is, and you wouldn't have these other consoles like PlayStation and Xbox without Nintendo making sure quality is correct and that it's good enough for consumers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things, like Keegs had touched on earlier, is going to be, kind of the restrictions, I guess, if you will, of how many games these guys can create. I mean, I'm sure everybody has heard of, Call of Duty and some of these other like sports types games, FIFA and Madden and stuff like that. I can only imagine, how bad the game would be if they decided, instead of releasing one game a year, they're going to release 5.
Just to summarize, like I say, gaming starts off as research projects, then it becomes financial, and then it implodes on itself. And then, like you just brilliantly said, then, like, I just learned a lot from that. You look at it coming back, and I'm sure, like, the viewers as well, like, they'll pick up things that we've spoke about and be like, oh, I see that in a game I enjoy. I didn't know that's where it came from. Or they might be on their Switch or Nintendo and thinking, like, Jesus Christ, I didn't realise the magnitude of Zelda, for example. So, yeah, I just wanted to connect the dots, really, before we move on. Like, we've covered the rise, the fall, and the rebirth of gaming. But, like, what I want to know is what stands out to you, Keys? Is there most defining era of gaming, and it could be what we've discussed, or it could be post Nintendo Revolution. It could be like the 90s, like you say, your Final Fantasies, your 3D gaming, your modern era. Like, what is the era for you that's really took gaming to the highs of what it is now?
So the era that stands out to me is the 2000s. In the 2000s, PlayStation was firmly set. Sega had died out at this point and they only continued to make arcade games. But what had happened is in the year 2000, the PlayStation 2 came out, which ended up going on to be the biggest selling console of all time, with I believe it was around 155 million units was sold of the PlayStation 2. And then what happened was Microsoft wanted to enter the home console market because they feared that consoles would start taking over personal computers, so your home entertainment systems. So they wanted to basically enter the console market. And in 2001, they launched the Xbox, and then that started to rival the PlayStation 2. So they started to become a rival of PlayStation. But PlayStation, since the PlayStation 2, has been the number one console seller. And then Xbox actually slotted into number 2 when the Xbox came out, which for the first time in history, Nintendo fell to number 3. So Nintendo for the first time was the third best-selling game company. And then the PlayStation 3 came out, and the Xbox 360, and then the Nintendo Wii. And it was those three that then, to this day, pretty much dominate the console market. You don't see any other new consoles coming out, and if they did, I don't think they would compete, because PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo are so firmly set in the positions.
I didn't even realise that. You don't think, do you, like, when the Xbox comes out, you just think, oh, they're just bringing a console out. I never knew that it was because of a fear towards the main product that they already have anyway. And that obviously goes with, like, PlayStation 2 being an entertainment system and what have you. And I wonder if that's where they thought, well, the next step up from an entertainment system is a PC. If you could pick one game, just one game, almost like a Desert Island Disc type vibe, for viewers to try and get stuck into, what would it be and why?
That's a good question, because I could pick 1,000, but I will have to pick my favourite game. And it's not the best game I've played, but it's my absolute favourite game, and that's Borderlands 2. And it is just great writing. The gameplay is fun. There's replayability. There's multiple characters to play through with. There is so much to do on it. If I had to choose one game, and that's the only game I can play, it would be Borderlands 2. It's just, like I said, it's my favourite game.
Well, there you go. I'm hoping that what people have picked up on this is that you know your stuff. So if it's a recommendation from you, I know it's a solid recommendation. I just want to thank you personally for coming on, man. It's been fascinating. I've learned so much, man. You're welcome back anytime.
No, thank you for having me on. I love this channel. I love what you're doing with it. The different historical events that you're doing, it's not focused on one thing. It's just great. Give this video a like. Give all the videos a like. Subscribe. It's just, I'm excited to see where this channel goes, and I'll be there to watch every video.
No, I appreciate it, man. And like I say, welcome back anytime.
And Squeegs again. I wanted to say thanks, brother. Known you for a long time. I appreciate all your insight on this one. It's a really good one right here, Robbie. But no, I appreciate everything. If you guys haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Thanks, guys.